Don't give up, you know it's true. You gotta do what you wanna do.
Hello, welcome to UPSC Gangsters. This is Arjun. I'll be taking you through the editorial analysis for the date 6th October. Alright, so let's get started. The first editorial, the heading says, States in Indian Diplomacy. The outcome of the Sharjah ruler's Kerala visit shows why more needs to be done to involve states in foreign policy. Alright, so this editorial is basically about the Indian state's role in foreign policy matters. Alright, how the Indian states actually have friendship or have economic cooperation with foreign countries. Alright, so let's get started. The first point, Chief Minister Pinarayi Vijayan announced at a convocation ceremony of the Calicut University to confer a doctorate on literature on the Sultan that the ruler had agreed to release 149 Indian prisoners from Sharjah jails. Alright, for actually kind of conferring doctorate on literature for the Sultan of Sharjah, alright, because he was instrumental in releasing 149 Indian prisoners from the Sharjah jails. The request I made was to release those people in jail. But why should they be returned? They will be allowed to live there. I will give them jobs, was the response of Sheikh Sultan, Mr. Vijayan said. In his speech, the Sharjah ruler said, there are not just people from Kerala or India in jails. We will release all nationals who have completed 3 years in jail in such cases. And why should they go back home? They will be allowed to continue to work there itself. The optimal use of such linkages is what Mr. Modi envisaged in the BJP manifesto. Team India shall not be limited to the Prime Minister-led team in Delhi, but it will also include chief ministers and other functionaries as equal partners. So this is what Modi has said in his speech earlier. Next point. In his earlier stint as Andhra Pradesh Chief Minister, Chandrababu Naidu negotiated with foreign governments to make Hyderabad an IT capital, prompting even presidents and prime ministers to visit the city on state visits. Given his personal reputation, the Government of India invited Mr. Naidu to lead the Indian delegation on information technology. This you have to note down. So he was chosen as the leader of to represent the Indian delegation. Alright, represent the Indian delegation on information technology. So this delegation will actually attend the international conferences based on information technology, alright, in UN, European Union and all that. So for that, Chandrababu Naidu has been made the leader of that Indian delegation. Alright, and previously what you should remember is how Sheikh Sultan was about to be given a literature and a doctorate in literature, alright, for Sheikh Sultan. So that you should remember. Those are important points of how states are doing these things, alright, on their own. So next point, in his earlier stint, we just finished that. The policy of countries like the US and China to encourage their state governments to take economic delegations to foreign countries and even to establish their own trading offices abroad was the model. This you have to remember. Such a model already exists in countries like US and China. Alright, so they have state governments. They have their state governments to actually engage themselves in international relations. Alright, so even in United States, you should note the point that states have a broader autonomy compared to the federal government, that is the central government in United States. So they have a broader autonomy. So the best example for this, how the states in USA are not bound to the central government's wishes. A good example for this is would be when Trump actually tried to pull back from the Paris Climate Agreement. So when he tried to pull back from the Paris Climate Agreement, states like California extended support to the Paris Climate Pact. Alright, they said it doesn't matter what the federal government has actually done, we will remain with the Paris Climate Agreement and we will adhere to it. Alright, so that is the kind of autonomy the states in USA have. Alright, so next point. The Ministry of External Affairs now has a States Division. So another important point to note, External Affairs has a States Division, or like a separate department, so that the Indian states can communicate with the foreign nations when it comes to economic cooperation and all that. Alright, so continuing, which keeps in touch with the states to assist them in building bridges with the countries in which they have a special interest on account of proximity or the presence of diaspora from that state. Alright, so they will be stressing on those states that have close relations with certain foreign countries, like how Kerala has a good relationship with the Middle Eastern countries, right? Because majority of Kerala people go there and work there and all. So there is a lot of understanding between the Middle Eastern countries and the Indian state of Kerala. So whatever states that are there, the kind of states that have links to certain countries, so that state along with that foreign country, the stress would be concentrated, and they would make sure that the state is actually in communication with that foreign nation, so that they can cooperate even further and in an easier manner. So next line, IFS officers have been asked to choose a state each to understand its special requirements and to advise them. This is another important point you should note. So the IFS officers, alright, they have been instructed to choose a state and understand about the state, what kind of state it is, what kind of economic situation, and with which foreign country they are linked with. Alright, they are having good relations with. So IFS officers, why each IFS officer is one particular state? You might have that thing in your mind. There are not many Indian foreign service officers in India, because IFS is a very important job. Alright, the scrutiny from the UPSC will be really hard in IFS. It's something more tougher than IAS to get through. Alright, I mean, with the ranks, and you have to be top notch in your interviewers with your interview skills. So there are not many IFS, around 100 or 120 since independence we had. Alright, so only so much of IFS officers, and all those IFS officers are kind of distributed in different consulates and embassies. Alright, so they are really less in number, because it is a very important job, right? So a small mistake from an IFS officer side might create havoc for the relations between the country and India, right? So that's why it is really important, and that's why the scrutiny is hard, and not many get chosen for the IFS job ultimately. Alright, so next one. So that is why basically they have asked each IFS officers to choose. So not many IFS officers are there, because it is a very important job, and that is why they have assigned they've asked the IFS officers to actually choose a state and know about its dynamics and its foreign relations with other nations. Alright, so that is why they have asked IFS officers each to choose a state. Alright, it's not many of them. So going to the next line. Gone are the days when regional affinities were considered undesirable in their handling of international issues. A foreign secretary used to say, half in jest, that no Punjabi should deal with Pakistan and no Tamil should deal with Sri Lanka. In the new dispensation, diplomats are expected to bring their regional expertise to take the correct decisions on neighbors. Alright? So before, like this was the trend. So for example, a Keralite should not deal with Middle Eastern countries. So an IFS officer from Kerala will definitely not be posted in the consulate or embassies that exist in the Middle Eastern countries. But now things have changed. Alright? So the local IFS officer or the local officer from that particular state will have a better understanding about his state, which is obvious, and he could bargain more, or he could take this cooperation forward in a more easier manner. That's what they feel with the foreign countries. Alright, so now things have changed. These people will be given preference accordingly, obviously. Alright, as regional parties began to exert influence at the national level, states began to dictate terms even in foreign policy. The states exercised veto on crucial issues, making it difficult for the Prime Minister to have his way in formulating policy. The Chief Minister of West Bengal stopped then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh from signing an agreement on sharing of Teesta waters with Bangladesh after the agreement was negotiated. So, you should note this point, why that thing didn't happen. Alright, why the Teesta agreement did not materialize. It's because of the involvement or the pressure that the Prime Minister faced from the state of West Bengal, alright, from the Chief Minister of West Bengal. So, Chief Minister of West Bengal was not okay with the river sharing agreement, though it was already agreed internationally, alright. So, because of the pressure of Bengal CM, the foreign policy had to be changed. So, such is the scenario right now. Political parties in Tamil Nadu not only insisted that India should support the US resolution against Sri Lanka in the Human Rights Council, but also stopped the Prime Minister from attending a Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting on the ground that Sri Lanka was not safeguarding the interests of Tamil minorities. So second example, alright, is going to be how Tamil Nadu pressurized the PM of our nation, alright, to cast a vote against Sri Lanka in the Human Rights Council meeting at the UN, alright. So, and the second one, what Tamil Nadu did was to actually make the Prime Minister skip the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, alright, which is again against Sri Lanka, alright. So, continuing with the point, but also stopped the Prime Minister from attending a Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting on the ground that Sri Lanka was not safeguarding the interests of the Tamil minority. Kerala itself had insisted that the Italian Marines who killed 2 fishermen should be tried in India and punished here, causing a rift in India's relations with the European Union. That, if you remember, there was a previous problem with the Italian Marines and Indian fishermen, that they shot and killed the Indian fishermen, and the Italian Marines, they were arrested and they were kept here and all, and the Italian government wanted Indian government to return those Marines, alright, and they said they will punish and all that, they will take care of it, they will investigate, but there was a lot of pressure from the Kerala state government, and they wanted them to be punished here. So there was a standoff between Italy and us, alright. So when this is another example of how the state is kind of interfering with international relations, and this time it was creating a sort of problem between Italy and India, alright. So both of us had some sort of misunderstanding because of the prolonged standoff, alright, in this case. So next point, in all these cases, the larger interests of India on the global scene were sacrificed to make life easier for the leaders of the states concerned. Even strategic and security issues were ignored in the process. Alright? So finally, you just remember, you do remember the Italian marine stories, alright? That is another example of how things were going bad between us and another country. Alright, so why these sort of things should not happen? Well, that's a different thing why the central government was listening to the state government. But yeah, this is federalism, so everything actually should be considered. Alright, but not at the expense of the entire country. That's what this point says. Next point, a new structure in which the states established should be a new structure in which the states are fully represented should be established, and Ministry of External Affairs should have offices in key states. Think tanks should be established in states to facilitate policy options and to provide inputs to the states and center. So, the last suggestion that has been made here is under the External Affairs Ministry there should be separate embassies or consulates for Indian states. Alright, so that is the final suggestion that is given here. So separate embassies or consulates for states individually in those foreign nations where those states have some sort of relationship with. Alright, so that should be the final thing that is should be materialized, is what this last point says. Alright, so this article is over. Let's get to the next one. Next one is a critique. Alright, so it is criticizing the bullet train initiative. So just the important points alone I've taken from the UPSC perspective, because nobody is going to ask you to criticize the government things. I mean, of course in an interview probably they might ask you, but still you have to stick with pro-government approach. Alright, because we are not there to actually make the government right or bring them in line and all that. No, we are actually gonna facilitate the government to function properly. So we are functionaries rather. So we are not supposed to speak like outright we shouldn't be against the government, because they are elected officials at the end of the day, and we should not be deciding whatever they are doing or going against whatever they are pursuing. So I've just taken the important points from the main perspective alone. Alright, the title says, does India need a bullet train? This is a wasteful project which only serves to deliver an illusionary feel-good perception among the wealthy. So first point, only a handful of high-income countries with specific demographics have high-speed rail, while many have failed in their efforts or have abandoned it after studying it. The main problem is viability given the huge costs involved. This is the first point you have to note. Alright, only a handful of the economic giants, only a handful of countries, high income countries, have adhered to introducing high speed rails. Alright, so this you have to note down, you have to remember. And what is the major cause behind it? Because of cost issues. Alright, so because of the huge cost and viability, that has been the reason why those countries actually quit on HSR. Alright, so going to the next point, Japan's pioneering Shinkansen, which connects Shinkansen is a high speed rail line, alright, which connects Tokyo and Osaka, passes through the biggest industrial and commercial centers, caters to almost 50% of Japan's population, and carries more than 150 million passengers annually. So remember, the high speed rail, even in Japan, it has been placed in a place where it is actually amounting to 50% of the Japanese population's commutation. Alright, so 50% of Japanese population travel in that route. Alright, so that you should remember. So this means that we are supposed to concentrate on those routes that have major traffic, alright, major population commutation. Alright, so that is where we are supposed to target. And Ahmedabad and Mumbai is like kind of vary in this deal, because there are other lines that are much more busier than this, right? So anyway, so 50% of Japanese population and 150 million passengers annually. Alright, so just remember these points. So that's why it was viable there. Alright, so South Korea's Seoul Busan HSR caters. HSR is high speed railway, caters to almost 70% of the population. This is also another point you should remember. So in South Korea, this line, the Seoul Busan high speed railway line, caters to 70% of the population. Alright, so that is why this line has been chosen and it is viable for them. And yet, the same point, okay, and yet struggles with viability. So even though it had 70% of the population traveling in that route, it's still struggling. Alright, so that is the thing we learn from this. Next point, France's fabled Paris-Lyon HSR service has had to periodically receive substantial subsidies. Taiwan's $14 billion HSR service between Taipei and Tainan virtually became bankrupt after losses of over $1 billion. So these are the examples of why, if the HSR is not handled properly, will actually result in a big loss. Alright, so the first example would be France example, alright, of how the Paris-Lyon service had to get a lot of substantial subsidies to attract customers, to attract travelers. Alright, second one would be the Taiwan's misfortune. Alright, so Taiwan's line was a very costly affair. So actually $14 billion have been spent and they actually went bankrupt. Alright, Taiwan's $14 billion HSR service between Taipei and Tainan virtually became bankrupt after losses of over $1 billion. Alright, so these things also you should remember. So, now continue. It realized only 50% of the projected ridership and required government bailout. Alright, so Taiwan had only 50% of ridership. Alright, so it had a certain amount, a certain target, a certain forecast that these many riders will use that line, but only 50% of them, of the projected target, was actually achieved through this. So obviously it went bankrupt and the government had to help them out. Alright, next point, Argentina gave up on HSR ambitions on cost grounds, deciding instead to upgrade its entire railway system to medium speed infrastructure, an option India should seriously consider. So note it down, Argentina, so almost a similar GDP of what India has, right? So Argentina actually bailed out on the plan of introducing an HSR line. Alright, so instead they wanted to concentrate on upgrading the entire railway system to medium speed infrastructure. Alright, so they wanted to improve the existing railway services, which we should also consider, he is saying, according to this article. Even the US is tentatively initiating a San Francisco-Los Angeles corridor and is still unsure about the densely populated industrial, commercial Philadelphia, Boston, New York, Washington DC corridor. Alright, so you have to seriously remember this. US, the economic giant, alright, the superpower USA is yet to introduce a proper high-speed railway network. Alright, when even they are not going ahead with such a thing, you know what it is for the developing nations. Alright, so next point, Turkey's Ankara-Istanbul HSR line is the only example from a middle income country, and the jury is still out on its viability. Alright, so Turkey is the only example of a middle income country that has introduced the high speed railway. Alright, but still it is very new and already they are having problems of viability and all. Next point is happening, says subsidies for the rich. The Mumbai Ahmedabad HSR costs around rupees 1 lakh crore. Estimates in the project report by the Indian Institute Management Ahmedabad show that at least 1 lakh passengers at fares of rupees 4,000 to 5,000 would be required daily for the project to break even. So, for us to retrieve the costs, alright, what has been said is the figures, alright. So, what has been said is daily there should be 1 lakh passengers, and the fare should be around rupees 4,000 to 5,000. Only then it is possible to recover the cost in a substantial manner within a decent time frame. Alright, continuing with the point, the tariff is too high. Airfares between the two cities are around rupees 2,500. Subsidies appear inevitable. Subsidies for agriculture, education and healthcare are taboo, but subsidies for the rich seem unproblematic. Alright, so this is criticism from their side. So if the ticket rates are going to be like 4,000, 5,000, nobody is going to use it, obviously, because even the flights have cheaper prices. So there's going to be more than 50% subsidy that is going to be provided by the government to make the railway up and running. Alright, so that is kind of a bad thing, and the criticism is when the government is supposed to spend for agriculture, education, healthcare, they are thinking and they are discussing and all that, and ultimately not doing it. But when it comes to these kind of things, the government is very ready to do it, and that's what they're saying. So next point, should India spend over 1 lakh crore for a 508 kilometer HSR used by well-heeled passengers when over 90% of rail passengers in India travel by sleeper class or lower class for thousands of kilometers? You have to note this point, very important. 90% of the Indian commuters, rail passengers, alright, they travel in sleeper classes or lower classes. Please remember this. Okay, so they did not actually opt for the AC first class or second class and 3-tier and all that. Alright, so 90% of the population actually dwells in the sleeper class coaches and the lower class coaches. Alright, so this is something you have to know, but when you even see the train line, you would actually know. Alright, so it's like tens of sleeper class coaches, and only 2 or 3 maximum would be of the first class and second class and all that. So that itself gives you a picture that nearly 80 to 90% is actually sleeper class and of the lower class. Alright, so next point, another myth is that the Japanese funding at 0.1% interest with the 15-year moratorium is almost free. Many business analysts have pointed out that the repayment amount will amount to rupees 1.5 lakh crore over 20 years, allowing for exchange rates and comparative inflation. So the Japanese government is actually providing a loan for this in 0.1% interest rate. So and the loan is actually for 15 years. So when you look at it, it's not much, alright, but the clause has been agreed in such a way that it will be adjusted according to the current prevailing exchange rates and inflation. So when you add all these factors, the interest rates would obviously go up, right? So which actually is not good, which is like having a normal interest, so nothing new in this. So that you have to remember the kind of loan Japan is giving us and the clauses involved in it. Alright, so this editorial is done. Let's head to the next editorial. The heading says Beyond Business as Usual. It is time for India and European Union to join hands in defense of the liberal order. Alright, so this is the heading, and take note of the heading also, because it ends by saying in defense of the liberal order. So liberal countries, alright, it basically means majority of the countries in Europe are liberal, have liberal governments, alright, Germany, France and even Britain to an extent, because the opposition party are in good numbers in the UK Parliament, which is a Liberal Party, the Labour Party, alright. And India, though BJP is in power, our constitution and our principles are very much based on liberal principles, alright. So we will not be deviating from it. But USA, on the other hand, their world power, the biggest economic power, as of now, is actually completely, against the liberal order, alright. Ever since the election of Donald Trump, conservative forces and the right wing have an upper say in US politics, alright. So USA, as per government standards, it's no longer a liberal government, alright. So it's no longer a liberal country when you take administration and the politics in that country now, alright. So we, along with the European Union, are actually representing the liberal generation of the planet, so the liberal powers of the planet, alright. So that is what the heading means. So the next one, let's get to the line. Trade and investment, science and technology, and innovation and education will remain on the Indo-European partnership platter. So these are the things India and European Union together are going to focus on: trade and investment, science and technology, and innovation and education. So please make note that military cooperation is not included, alright. So that is not included. Everything else needed for the development of a nation and a bloc has been included, alright. The next point, but such tactical cooperation will prove meaningless unless it is given a strategic and democratic direction to navigate an increasingly hostile global environment. With the US reducing its global footprint and China moving in to fill the vacuum, this is the right time for New Delhi and Brussels to join hands in defense of the liberal order. Brussels, don't get confused, it is where the headquarters of the European Union is located, alright, in Europe. So we know that USA is actually kind of stepping back right now because of Donald Trump, where he's saying America first, and he's concerned about America foremost, and then he's going to think about the other countries and all that. So it means that USA is slowly gonna retract, and even on an economic basis, USA is actually going through a sluggish growth phase, alright. But China has risen a lot, and China's like I said that day, it is just like $2-3 trillion away from being the biggest economic power on the planet. So within a few years, China will be overtaking the US economy, alright. So they'll be becoming the biggest economy on the planet. So China is slowly moving in to fill the power vacuum, alright. They are gonna be the superpower very soon. So this is the right time for New Delhi and the European Union to strike a deal and have a prolonged friendship and relationship, alright. Taking such a deal entails not merely protecting the international principles and institutions that have underpinned the development, security and stability of both India and Europe, but also reforming the multilateral architecture to prevent the rise of isolationist, unilateral and authoritarian forces. Alright, by this line they are referring to China. Right, why European Union and India have better chances of having an economic cooperation that would last for ages is that both are democratic institutions, and China on the other hand is authoritarian and it is communist. It's a communist country, right? So it is not based on democratic principles. Therefore, they feel this would last and China might not last in the long run. Alright? For inspiration on how to steer their relationship ahead, European and Indian officials will have to look no further than the landmark resolution passed last month by the European Parliament. On September 13th, 751 parliamentarians from 28 states resolved that the European Union-India partnership has not yet reached its full potential, and called on Brussels and New Delhi to strengthen their efforts in promoting effective rule-based multilateralism and address security challenges with respect for international law and cooperation among democratic states. Alright, so there was a landmark resolution or a declaration passed on September 13th, alright, at the European Union Parliament meeting. So European Union basically has a parliament of its own, alright, that has the members, alright, that has representatives from the member countries, member European nations. So there are 751 parliamentarians. So together they made up for a resolution. They passed a resolution saying they have to increase the ties between European Union and India. Alright, so like I said, both of them are democratic institutions. So they have acknowledged the fact that we have not used our full capacity yet, and we have to do so in future to bring up something that is sustainable and solid. Alright, China's formidable Belt and Road Initiative (BRI) is changing the balance of power and threatening European unity. So Belt and Road Initiative is an initiative by China that that is a dream project of the current Chinese Premier Xi Jinping. So he is of the vision that they have to restore the land Silk Road and the sea Silk Road. Alright, and together they will be able to dominate the economic trade of the planet, because the old Silk Road started from China and it went all the way to the end of Europe. Alright, so they want to restore that, a single road that can be used for transport and trade and all that, and similarly a single sea route. So if this is completed, China will have almost unlimited access to the world trade, and they will be the formidable force in deciding the fate of world trade, right? So that is also happening, and China is striking deals with countries of the Middle East and certain European countries. Alright, so if this happens and those European countries try to shift towards China, this would actually divide Europe, right? So therefore, this line actually reiterates the fact that China's formidable Belt and Road Initiative is going to change the balance of power and will threaten European unity in future. Same line, but if India is serious about engaging the EU and presenting itself as an alternative to China, it will have to open its market to European goods, services and investments. So European Union basically will try to do what? They will try to replace China, and in that place they will try to have India with them as their chief trading partner, and India being the stable, formidable force other than China. So if European Union is to harness that with India should actually open its market to European goods, make European goods more affordable in India, tax breaks, subsidies and all that. So encouragement should be given for goods that are coming from the European Union. So that's what this line says. It will have to open its market to European goods, services and investments. India will also have to invest in greater coordination, security cooperation with Europe in overlapping spheres of influence. For example, it is puzzling that India continues to stay away from the European Union coordinated naval escort missions for the United Nations World Food Programme in the Indian Ocean, when China has already participated 11 times. So, this is another point you have to seriously consider and note about the UN World Food Programme. Alright, it seems that this is a EU-sponsored UN program. Alright, so European Union is actually having a lot of stake in this. So when the UN World Food Program is using the Indian Ocean waters to reach other countries and all that, India has not at all participated, it seems, whereas China has participated 11 times. Understood? So when India is staying away from these sort of international efforts by European Union, it would send a signal that India is not interested in European Union, right? So that is something we have to work towards. But at the same time, China has participated 11 times. So it is evident that we have a lot of catching up to do. Alright? Next point. India makes for a much more attractive and sustainable partner than China. Rooted in its democratic institutions and open societies, the Indian and European world views are far more similar than usually assumed. This is increasingly manifested in their converging interests to ensure Eurasian connectivity plans that are truly multilateral and also financially and environmentally sustainable. Alright, so this point says that there are a lot of things that are common between European governmental institutions and Indian governmental institutions. For the first fact is obviously both are democratic, right? The other things are there are many administrative things that are very similar. So, for example, how our civil service structure is coordinated, how our civil servants are, how the examination is conducted, and all that. So these are very similar between Europe and India. Alright, so how the civil services recruitment and all happens in India, almost the same way it happens in Europe. For a fact, the civil services were got from the United Kingdom, right? While the British were ruling us, civil services were created and Indians were allowed to give the examinations and all that. So till that we are following that protocol, that procedure. Alright, so more than what a normal person would think, India and Europe have a lot in common. Alright, so that's what they're saying. So when you're having a lot of things in common, there will be some better understanding, alright, than what Europe would have with China. So the last point, the protection of international Eurasian connectivity plans that are truly multilateral and also financially and environmentally sustainable. The protection of international legal principles such as the freedom of navigation or the development of regulatory frameworks that foster scientific and technological innovation under the rule of law. Last, you have to definitely note, this is a good point that has been made, alright? The rule of law. So whatever cooperation that is to be made, so whatever agreements that are going to be signed and whatever plans that are going to be formulated together, everything should be ensured under the rule of law. Alright? The procedure established by law and the rule of law clause. So these are principles of democratic institutions. Alright, so we have a procedure in place, we have a voting system, we have discussions and all that. So chief democratic principles these are. So based on this, Europe and India can work, something which Europe and China will not be able to work in future because they're not a democracy, right? So that's fine. So these are the points regarding the important points regarding this editorial. Let's go to the next one. Next one, the title says protecting street vendors. So the pretty straight, this is about street vendors and whatever problems they have been facing and all. Alright? So the subheading says they can be evicted only as a last resort as per the law. On October 4th, hawkers near Mumbai's Haji Ali Dargah complained to the Supreme Court that the authorities, in the name of removing encroachments, were trying to evict them. Senior advocate Anand Grover for the hawkers told the bench led by the Chief Justice of India that his clients are protected under the Street Vendors Protection of Livelihood and Regulation of Street Vending Act 2014. Please note down this act, alright, the Street Vendors Act. Alright, so he's saying basically, as per the Street Vendors Act of 2014, you cannot evict these people from wherever they're doing business. The law mandates that hawkers can be removed only as a last resort and or unless there is a clear and urgent need to rehabilitate them. Alright? So the law basically states that you cannot remove them as per the government's wish. If there is only something really urgent or something very clear, only then they can be evicted from the place, and that too the government has to ensure that they have been rehabilitated. alright, meaning they have been given an alternate place where they can do business and they can live, alright. So another place has to be arranged. Only after that, even if it is urgent, they can actually kind of evict these people, else they cannot. Next point, to avoid arbitrariness of authorities, the law had provided for a survey of all existing street vendors and a subsequent survey at least once every 5 years, and issue certificates of vending to all the street vendors identified in the survey, with preference to SC, ST, OBC, women, persons with disabilities, and minorities. So these are different points, something you have to note. The first thing you have to note is about the survey, alright. There should be regular surveys that are supposed to be conducted, and based on the survey they will issue certificates that these people are street vendors and all, alright. They are covered under the latest survey and all, because when a future problem occurs, they should be able to identify themselves as registered street vendors. Only then it will be easy for them to fight in court or refer to some rule, right? So the surveys should be done regularly, and if there is a question, there might be a prelims question on this. If there's a question, is there any reservation for under the Street Vendors Act? Yes, there is every sort of reservation, and there's reservation for SC, ST, OBC, women, and even persons with disabilities and minority sections too. Alright, so all these people have preferences. Next point, it said no street vendor would be evicted until the survey was completed and certificate of vending issued. So, an important point in this act is the street vendors cannot be evicted before the survey is conducted and the cards have been issued, the certificate have been issued. Alright, so this is another important clause. So according to this, the advocate would have said, see, the survey has not been done in the first place, the certificates has not been issued, and the government of that place, Maharashtra government, Mumbai metropolitan government, is trying to evict these people. So this is sort of illegal according to the act. Alright, so these are the important points in this editorial regarding the street vendors. Going to the next editorial, the heading says, Mahajan recommends transfer of Kasaragod. The Mahajan Commission is understood to have upheld Mysore's claims for the areas in Kerala and recommended the transfer of entire Kasaragod Taluk in Kerala minus 8 villages lying south of the Chandragiri river to Mysore. So this is not like this editorial is something not you should remember entirely, but just remember these sort of recommendations have been made so that you can remember the procedure that is followed for the delimitation. Alright, which is from one state the areas can be taken and they can be put to another state. So if a question comes, alright, about about whether you can actually take territories from one state and fit it to another state, when you do something like this, if the consent of the state is required or the consent of the other state is required and all that. Alright, so here you can see the commission has been formed by the central government. So why is it being formed? Because the central government is going to review the situation, and based on the recommendations of the commission, the central government will take action. Right, so meaning central government can actually override the state's views while the central government is trying to transfer certain piece of land from one state to another state. Alright, the commission in making this recommendation is stated to have pointed out that the transfer has been suggested having regard to the full facts available to it since the appointment of the state's Reorganisation Commission. The commission is understood to have decided the case of Kasaragod on administrative, economic and geographical factors and communication facilities deemed sufficient to override linguistic considerations. So this is something you have to remember for sure, because all these things have been based on facts of the state's Reorganization Commission, which was actually constituted after our independence, right? That one. So, how the Kasargod thing was decided, they considered these factors. Alright, they have considered administrative, economic, and geographical considerations. Alright, so based on all this, they have decided that Kasargod should go to Mysore. Alright, and not only with geographical considerations, but also they have considered communication facilities. Alright, so if the communication facilities are good, they can override the linguistic considerations, the linguistic factor. Alright, so this place should belong to this state or whatever because of the language, the major language that is used, the linguistic population. A lot of Malayalis are there in that area, and therefore it should belong to Kerala. So the central government can override this logic with what? By the communication development that has happened there. Alright, so if the communication facilities are sufficient, they would suggest that no, we cannot consider the fact that these people are, majority of the people are Malayalis, and therefore it should belong to Kerala. No. So communication is going to be a factor that can override linguistic considerations. So remember that point. The commission has recommended the retention of Belgaum city and Karwar and Mysore, and transfer of some areas in Maharashtra to Mysore and vice versa. So do you understood? The transfer is going to happen from two states to Mysore. One is Maharashtra and the other one is Kerala, we just saw. So these are the things under this report, this editorial. So these are the important things. So just know how the stuff of delimitation, or how to take one territory from one state and give it to another state, the procedure involved in it is clear through this editorial. Alright, so that's it. These are the editorials for the date of 6th October. If you have any doubt, please leave a question on the comment section. I'll be seeing that, and I'll give you an answer as soon as possible. See you in the next editorial analysis. Till then, take care. Bye bye.